Good evening, everyone, and welcome into Pressing Issues. What is today? Our May 30th, 2021 episode. I am your host tonight, Matt Arterbury, filling in for Jason Diffendahl, who is, I believe, out of town this weekend. So I'm with my illustrious panelists, as always. Tonight we have Coach as one of our panelists. Actually, he is frozen. So we also have Mike with us tonight as well.
Welcome, everybody.
And all the way from Tokyo, we have Spencer with us.
Good morning. It's Monday here. It's 9 a.m. So
Perfect. Well, I hope you're all having a great Memorial Day weekend. We are here to finally talk about the news. The past few weeks, I know Jason and the team has been going over some of our more specialty episodes with the cruise line and with Disneyland reopening, but we're here back with the news to give our long-form takes on what's been going on in the Disney company over the past 3 weeks now. Fortunately, we've had a pretty busy week in terms of news, and kind of our keynote story of our show this week is the 50th anniversary commercial finally debuted this week. I know that Tom Corliss put together quite a long article with some really interesting points and thought-provoking points about what we'll be getting, at least what appears that we'll be getting, at least that was announced in this initial commercial. So I'm going to turn over to the panelists right now. Start off here with Mike. What are your thoughts on what we saw with this commercial? Obviously, as put up by Tom, not much nostalgia here. It's mainly a lot of pretty things. So what are your thoughts on this commercial for us here?
Sorry, I was muted.
Mike. Okay, perfect.
I thought it was a great hype video. Your typical, let's show everybody what's coming. Let's get everybody excited. Let's start gathering the buzz and the discussions and get those vacation planning people, geared up and ready to go. So that was kind of my quick take on it. Spencer?
Well, I have a lot of opinions on this. I come from the resort where every 5 years is a giant million upon millions of dollars is spent on anniversary campaigns. So I have a little bit of a high celebrations. I have to say I agree with Tom on pretty much everything he said, and I'm frozen. I genuinely. Oh, it's just a video. Okay. I think that Disney is really missing out on capitalizing on the nostalgia of the 50th anniversary. I grew up going to Walt Disney World as well, and even if I spend 5 seconds Googling it, I don't really see a compelling reason to come back for the 50th. They're not talking about new rides. They're not playing on nostalgia. It just looks like another commercial. It looks the same as every other, hey, Disney World is here. Bring your family.
Yeah, and I think you make a really great point there. Both of you do as well. Is that I think we've talked about this a lot, and why we all go back to the parks is our nostalgia for the parks. Even if we don't agree with where the company is going, we don't agree where how they might retheme a ride or reimagine a ride, we still go back because we love the parks. And looking at this video, it is a lot of flash and flair to bring in new guests, new capital, really, for them, a new demographic where they're kind of forgetting their kind of fan base, the people that spend the most money on ultimately little pins and stuffed animals that we really don't need, but we love it because we love the parks. And I think this is really kind of the antithesis of how they view their client base, their customer base, is that they've pretty much now said, in my mind, kind of a big middle finger to the the revisit guest, because all of us have gone, or a lot of us have gone to the parks for 10, 15, 20, even someone's out there 50 years, and all that's forgotten. All they really care about is those Instagram influencers and those parents that want to make sure they are part of the celebration because they have a nice photo at the 50th. And those who pursue being at events, kind of like what Tom does, there's a lot of people that do that with Walt Disney World. They just want to be there for the big events so they can say they're a part of that and experience that energy. And I think a lot of those people that go back for anniversaries and special events are really disappointed with this event because right now all we know is that we're getting the beacons of magic, which we can see anytime we go to the parks. Obviously, these will have different skins, different lighting packages on them. And Mickey and Minnie have different outfits. And a park or a ride that's going to be in a different park outside of the main castle park. So for me, I'm going in July, and I'm glad I'm going in July. And I probably won't go for another year and a half. It's kind of my vacation cycle at this point. And I won't feel sad about missing October 1st because for me, there's really no draw. There's really no kind of exclusive experience that we know about now. And I think it's a good hype video for new people. But for hype video for returning guests, I don't really feel that hyped up about it.
Spencer made
I'm
a
not
good
even
point.
sure it's. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you take the 50, the where they splash the 50 on the screen, you could pretty much recycle that commercial as for any, Disney X, whatever you want to make it. It was very, very generic, pixie dusty. It's a good point. It was very, very bland. Like I said, I think it plays to the casual fan, the person that's like
Most definitely.
does a lot, follows things on the boards a little bit, knows that Disney's the place to go for vacations, wants to be, say they went. But yeah, you're right. There's very little in there for anybody that follows them closely and is looking for that next cool thing that's going to bring you back for another time.
I'm not even sure that that's true. I'm not even sure it targets that demographic because even if you were trying to target the casual fan, the people who come back every year or every 2 years, every 5 years, those are the people who are going to be spending the money a lot of the time. Of course, there's plenty of people who they come to Disney World once and that's that. And then there's also fans like us, but obviously we're the minority. We're probably 2% at most of attendance. This is just off the top of my head and pure speculation, but I think the big moneymaker and most of your people who are going to Disney World are the people who are going to be coming back every year, 2 years, 5 years. And we've talked extensively on this show about how Disney is giving them less and less of a reason to come back. And this is just another example of that. I mean, think about 15 years ago for the 50th anniversary of Disneyland, we still got more for Disneyland's 50th anniversary at Walt Disney World than we're getting for Walt Disney World's actual 50th anniversary. Because what they did Cinderellabration and Soaring and Lights, Motors, Action, and I don't remember what they did at Animal Kingdom, but they did like the whole, we're doing one thing at every park for Disneyland's 50th anniversary. And like you said, we've got the beacons of light and pretty costumes. We're not getting Tron. We're not getting Cosmic Rewind. We're getting a duplicate screen ride from Paris that nobody really even likes there. I don't see any compelling reason for anybody who would be thinking, why should I come to Disney World? This is just how it always has been. I think that what this is trying to do is remind people that Disney World exists because we're coming out of the pandemic in the United States. People are itching to travel again. Everyone has been talking about for a year now how much they just want to get out of their house, get out of their city, get out of their routine and go somewhere. And they're going to go to Disney World. But this is the time when Disney should be I'm almost done, I promise. This is the time when Disney should be pulling out all the stops and being like, here's all these cool things. Here's why you should keep coming back. This is an amazing place. And not just like, well, you're going to come anyway, so we don't have to do anything. Because they're not establishing that desire to keep coming back.
Yeah, and I think we keep comparing, and I think it's somewhat of a fair comparison between the 60th, the 50th at Disneyland versus what we're seeing at the 50th here at Disney World. The thing we need to take into mind is that the Disney company has become less about the creatives and the people that care about the guests and more about the business. And so from a business perspective and a marketing perspective, Disneyland is a much more of a local park. They have returning guests day in and day out that live in the area, that are there multiple times a week sometimes, or at least pre-pandemic, that are there multiple times a month. They're there experiencing the parks day in and day out. And that's a main majority of their population that walk through the gate every day. Where Disney World, obviously there's many annual pass holders in the Florida area, but a lot of them are coming in from out of town once a year, twice a year. And so the nostalgia factor in Disneyland is a great hook for them, for those annual pass holders or now legacy pass holders to come back on those anniversaries and during the anniversaries. Where Disney World guests, like I said, are more vacation goers versus annual pass holders. And so for them, from like that perspective of how do we get them into the park, they just want to make the park look beautiful and a place to get a great photo op and make sure I hope things are cleaned up and look pristine on October 1st. But all they care about from a Disney World guest is that you come and you have that initial attraction. We're kind of like mosquitoes to these beacons of light. At least in their mind, is that as long as there's something pretty to look at, we'll come. And the reality of it is, consumer trends haven't changed enough for them to realize that they need to pursue another path because people are still coming.
And I brought this up on a couple shows ago about, and Spencer just touched on it too, about we're not getting a lot of the big things for the first part of the 50th. And I know we had a pandemic, but there's been no urgency to get any of those in place. And I feel like they're using that as a direct carrot. So you've got the 50th as your next hype, and then you can push something 6 months down the line. Maybe it's whatever's next up, either Tron or the Cosmic Rewind, and then you can throw the next one 6 months, 8 months, 12 months down the line. It's like they know they've got this pent up demand that's going to swell, and as it starts to wane, they're just going to keep dropping these new carrots out there, trying to keep that steady influx in. And one side of me says that's great. That's if you're a marketing money guy, that's probably a great way to go. But as a loyal fan who is willing to come back after this 16 months of craziness in the world, I feel a little cheated. I feel like, and I'm like you, October 1st means nothing to me this year. I have no desire to be there on October 1st to fight the crowds, to see the same old. Well, I might get Harmonious, okay, and that's a great unknown. But yeah, I feel a little cheated on. I feel very cheated on this. These years of time I've put in as a fan to have the 50th basically be an extended marketing play to keep people coming back over the next 18 months. That's kind of harsh, but I think that's how I feel.
No, yeah.
And I think it's really annoying as well, and disingenuous almost of Disney to use the pandemic as a crutch to have an excuse to not open Tron and not open Guardians. Universal kept building Velocicoaster through the pandemic. Super Nintendo World was opened during the pandemic. They're still building the Frozen thing in Hong Kong through the pandemic. Like, there's so many projects going forward that claiming the pandemic as an excuse for not building Tron and Guardians is just, it feels disingenuous no matter what perspective you're looking at it from a fan perspective, or you're just someone who casually reads news sites like WDWNT or WDW Magic, or whatever those forums are. It just really feels like they are not even pretending to care. You know, that's all I got there.
No, yeah, yeah. No, and I agree, and I think it's one of those. The Velocicoaster for me and the Super Nintendo world for me as well is kind of like when you're in grade school and you don't finish your assignment because your dog ate your homework, kind of thing. Where like your next door neighbor also has a dog, and their dog ate their homework as well, but they took the extra steps to get that homework done before school started. Where Universal put the work in, kept their employees on staff during the pandemic, ideally enough for them to do it in a safe manner where OSHA didn't get involved saying that they weren't doing something safe, or at least per pandemic guidelines and restrictions. But they have, and I've heard a lot of people talk about how Universal is owned by Comcast, and Comcast had all this money coming in because their services they offer, and Disney didn't have that. A big part of their segment was not operating for, was it 6 months, 9 months? So that there's all that lost revenue, and I understand that's true. But Disney also has been very open about their success with Disney Plus. All the money that's brought in, the studios brought in through Disney Plus, their direct-to-consumer products, online sales, all boomed during the pandemic. And so to say that one hand can't help the other, where we've seen in the past where the parks have assisted the studios, things like that, in their times of need where their projects failed. And so this excuse of, well, the parks were closed and didn't have the revenue coming in, and Universal did have the revenue coming in from another segment of their company, I agree. I understand that's a thing. But in the past, parks have always helped other segments of the company as well. And to keep making the excuse for Disney that the money wasn't coming in from the parks, that's old news. We know that they have the money in the bank to run it and make sure these things happen. And I keep also talking to people about this, the 50th anniversary, and for me, it's, as a married man, and hopefully my wife and I make it to our 50th anniversary as long as I can stay alive, that on our 50th anniversary, if I tell her 2 years in advance, year in advance, that I have this big trip planned for you and things like that, and I hope that I can deliver on that promise. Yes, I might experience a pay cut or may have lost my job, something like that, but as a successful person that I'm trying to become, I hopefully have money in the bank to make sure that still happens. And it's not like Disney lost their job. They just had a little pay cut. And we know that other money is coming in from other parts of the company. So to keep making this excuse for Disney to keep, obviously many of us are loyal to the Disney brand, but we don't need to be loyal to these executives because what they're doing to the fans, how they're treating the fans right now, is not excusable for how much money and time and nostalgia and love we have for this brand. Where them to keep using the pandemic as a crutch when we know that their financials were there. There were other segments of the company that could have covered them or even gone in on some debt on some things, and they didn't need to. They had money in the bank. They are a very profitable company making billions upon billions of dollars each year. So the comparison is true, I think, between Universal and Disney in this account, even though Universal had a constant income with their TV services, internet services, and Disney had Disney Plus and other segments of the company to take care of them during this time. So
we've got someone new. He's here. He's alive. He made it on the show.
There he is. Everyone, Coach.
Coach is back.
Coach.
Unfrozen.
You're not wrong, but there's two things that I just want to kind of jump off of that with. Number one, the only difference between Disney and Comcast's streams of revenue is that Disney is not an ISP. Everything else is the same. Comcast has movie studios. Comcast has Peacock. Comcast has theme parks. The only thing I can think of that Comcast does that Disney doesn't is phone and internet. And sure, that's a lot of money, but nonetheless, the Walt Disney Company was still, number one, they have a lot of money in the bank already. Number two, they were still profitable for, what was it, 2 quarters last year? And this is also a very uniquely Disney World problem. Every resort around the world has had construction underway during the pandemic. Disneyland is building Avengers Campus and Runaway Railway. We are building Fantasy Springs, but we're not owned by the Walt Disney Company. Paris is building its giant expansion in its Avengers Campus. Hong Kong is building the Frozen Land. Shanghai is building Zootopia. But the only one that stopped and used the pandemic as an excuse for why it's late is Disney World. Avengers Campus is still going to open in Paris and in Disneyland as on time as they could. Fantasy Springs is ahead of schedule. Frozen will open next year. Zootopia, I don't remember when that's supposed to open, but it still seems to be on time. This is a very uniquely Disney World problem, and it's frustrating to see that they think so little of Disney World that they feel like it's acceptable to do this just because it isn't explicitly a locals park. I think people do still have expectations about their vacations, even if they don't live in Orlando.
I don't know if they think so little of it as it's the number one destination place in the world, and they figure that vacuum when it opens up is going to suck people in no matter what. I think it's a very cold and calculated, plot. So.
Yes, I can see that, but it's still frustrating. I won't say more. I'm sure everyone else has thoughts on this.
Can you guys actually hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. I have Disney tech at my house right now, all over it. No. So if that was the case, I'd still be frozen. No. To your point about, and I was listening the whole time, trying to inventing curse words from my computer. It's one of those things where I think, to your point, Matt, you said 50th anniversary, right? 50th implies nostalgia, right? It kind of implies that. The commercial had no nostalgia whatsoever, number one. Number two, like Tom's epic rant that he went on, dare I say, Diffendahl-esque, he definitely was somebody who pointed out the fact that they had opportunities without spending money. And for me, it's the people running the company don't have a long-term plan, right? The plan is short-term. It's about short-term this, 6 months, 18 months, a year, 2 years. The problem is I think it's going to take a major catalyst for them to wake up. If there is that pent-up demand, there is that short-term kind of gain. Well, people are going to show up anyway. People are going to go outside. People are going to do stuff. But the problem is you're going to erode all the ancillary other things. And I think Disney has an issue in terms of understanding what causation really means. They're really good about correlation. They're really good about taking stats and kind of skewing it so it fits their narrative. But I think they struggle to understand the difference between causation and correlation. For example, you have a headache, you take aspirin, your headache feels better. But if what's causing the headache is stress, a tumor, something major that's not related to just a regular headache, and you don't treat that and you're just treating that symptom, eventually it's going to come back full force. And I think Disney is being very reactive in terms of all their mask mandates and all the stuff that we're going to get into and talk later, but they're just reacting to what everybody else is doing. And I think that's going to come back to bite them, especially as Universal's starting to close this gap a little bit. This 50th is a big deal. As a family that's going for a 50th wedding anniversary in conjunction with the 50th over this summer, it's a nostalgic time. And if we go and it's a bad experience, there's going to be a group of 11 to 12 people that are probably not going to go back for a very long time. So you run yourself into, not only are you going to lose money, you're going to gain money short term, sure, but you're going to lose money on merchandising. And you're seeing that in California. You're seeing the pass holders and the legacy holders basically saying, too bad, we're not paying for it. And you're watching them try to scramble. They had their taste of events and they thought, well, we sold out in minutes, so it's just going to be like that. They're just going to all pay out the nose. And to me, it's very parallel to Star Wars. Right? Oh, it's just Star Wars. If we slap Star Wars on it, people would just go to Galaxy's Edge and spend all kinds of money. Well, how's that working out for you? So,
every park, I think, has operated under that assumption, and so far, it has only really worked here. And that's just because Japanese fans are a completely different breed of Disney fan, in both a good and bad way sometimes. I love our fans here, don't get me wrong. But like at Disneyland, I think they thought that the same thing would happen because Disneyland fans are also pretty intense. Dare I say, close to Japanese fan intense. And it just didn't happen because it's so expensive and it wasn't worth the $150 ticket. I mean, Disney, part of the problem, as I'm sure we have all said a number of times on this show and many other shows, is that people come back to Disney because they have these memories of the quality experience. And if you're only focusing on those past memories and not at least attempting to create some kind of quality memory for future guests, over time, your number of recurring guests who, like I said earlier, I think are the majority of people coming to Disney World, or the people who come every 1, 2, 5, 10 years, they're just not going to come back anymore, and they're going to slowly lose out on that edge to Disneyland or to Universal or to other theme parks around the world who are quickly catching up to what Disney's doing. I mean, what is it? I think 5 of the top 25 theme parks visited in 2019 were in China. There are plenty of other parks that are willing to step into Disney's shoes. Universal, of course, but many others.
Yeah, and I think, and I've heard the sentiment online a little bit, especially in light of this commercial, is that there's been a strong paradigm shift. And I've kind of talked about this a little bit earlier in the show. A strong paradigm shift about how Disney views their guests. They view us as numbers now versus guests. And what I mean by that is that we are allowing them to do this because there's all this pent-up demand, especially Disneyland or Disney World, where even though Epcot is down for the count, there's nothing really new going on in the parks. Those parks are packed to the gills each and every day. Park passes are gone months in advance, where Disney realizes now they have us in this position where you're coming. No matter what, you're coming. You have a plan to visit Disney World once a year, twice a year, whatever that may be. You're still coming.
But that's not going to last.
No, I agree. But what's going to happen here now is that we're now seeing hour and a half waits for some of these basic rides in this period of time. Obviously, distancing plays a factor in that. But I think now we're opening up the door for Disney to really skyrocket prices and eliminate the additional additional amenities that we all know and love. Because for a long time, Disney's perspective was we got to get more people in the door. We have to find ways to attract people, get people in the door. And at this point, it's how do we slow them down? And how can we get more money out of each individual person? Exactly. Is that there's always been this like, come to me, we'll give you all these free things, free amenities, and we're seeing Magical Express go down to up to Mirrors to do that and charging people for that amenity. We don't know the future of fast passes. I've heard online now that there's the reality of paid fast passes might be closer to the future than we really think they might be. And
every resort.
Yeah, the trams are going down. Some of the monorails are out of service. I think that's for distancing purposes and some maintenance. But like some of those basic amenities are going away, and because they want to really, they're pricing certain demographics out of the parks to really focus on the people that can pay the potentially $200 per day at the parks, go to the most expensive resorts for those additional amenities. I think there's going to be a greater price gap between the premium resort, the deluxe resorts, and the moderate resorts. And even the moderate resorts are more expensive than like a basic hotel room, and the quality isn't there to really justify staying at those resorts, other than the perceived convenience that we've all had about reservations and fast passes. If those start to go away, I think we might see the death of the cheap resorts, the value resorts, because maybe they want to make room for more things in the parks. because they realize they just want to push people into those deluxe to moderate hotels. And if you don't want to have that Disney experience, you're going to stay off site. And if you want those amenities, you're going to pay for them. I think that's just the reality of what we're going into. The writings on the wall. From, like I said, Disney does not care about their guests. They see them as a number and a price tag, and they want to keep those guests that can pay the money coming year after year, and they really don't care about the people that are thrifting and more concerned about free water than they are about buying a meal at the Brown Derby. So I think that's kind of the shift we're seeing.
I think there is reality to the idea that Disney would rather see less people at the park if it meant that they are spending more per guest.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to see. We're going to see.
If you think about,
but all this to say, sorry, go ahead.
I was like, if you think of an operational model, I mean, purely business, I mean, that's the way to go. Having to build more space and put more employees into an area to manage more guests is a very expensive proposition when you can just take what you have today and charge more or get more from them and up it. That's a gold mine for any business when that happens. And Matt, you missed the part. Now they're looking at, they're testing out upgrades for a ride where you have to come in and pay $60 just to get the basic to start off with to get a different ride experience. And to me, that's, that if that has any type of legs, I think you're going to see that permeate across every ride that can handle it. Toy Story Mania, anything that's got screens.
Yeah.
It's going to be
real quick,
everywhere.
Mike, we have a super chat real quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. We have a super chat from Gatlinburg Bears. He asked us, when does Disney implement a 2-drink minimum order on top of a daily admissions? And Mike's kind of going on that point now is that to get experiences, you have to pay more. To get certain experiences, you have to pay a lot more. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mike. That's always been there to a point. You could get a private tour and get backdoored into rides. You can stay at a monorail resort and get to the park quicker. But those were kind of ancillary experiences. But now when you're talking that to get on a ride and get the full benefit from the ride, you have to pay. And that really makes me feel bad for that family of, I've got 3 kids or 4 kids and I take them on the ride and I'm not spending $60. I have to spend 60 times how many kids I have to get my kids that experience. It's just, to me, that really takes the heart and soul out of kind of the fact that anybody that buys a ticket and walked in the park got a very similar experience. That, to me, that's always been the heart and soul of that Disney experience. Yeah. No, yeah.
And this is a trend across the industry, I think, because at Super Nintendo World, and this is going to be relevant because it's opening in Hollywood soon, and it's going to come to Orlando eventually. With Super Nintendo World, you really can't do much without the power-up band. Like if you don't have the band on your wrist, you can't do any of the mini games in the land. You can't, punch any of the blocks and stuff like that. All you can do is eat the food, shop, and ride Mario Kart. And even so, you're still only getting kind of part of the experience because you can't track your score and see how you're doing. And on the Yoshi Adventure, you can't get the awards for pressing all the buttons right and such. And these are, how much are they in dollars? I think these are about $30 each. And so, you have your family of 4, you're spending $120 on a wristband just so you can go into Super Nintendo World and feel like you're not wasting your time. It's the same thing with the web slinger thing that they're releasing in California. Yeah. We're going to see, this is a trend that the industry is moving towards, and it started with Hogsmeade wands where it kind of just ups the experience. Now they've figured out that they can just build the entire experience around an upcharge item. and
Mhm.
you don't have to buy it, but if you don't buy it, you're only getting a third of what you paid for, basically.
Yeah,
And you know,
yeah,
$30 for a watch that you wear around the entire world, I can get that. But $60+ for a single use item, you know, I can use it in one place only, and it changes the keystone attraction of that land dramatically. That to me is going a little far in my mind.
Yeah, and just kind of go back to like, once again, thank you, Gatlinburg Bears, for that super chat. Is that like this is a proposition that I'm going into in the next couple months? Is that I'm a big Star Wars fan, and this is my first physical trip to Galaxy's Edge. I've been to Disney since Galaxy's Edge opened, but I had the chance to get over to Hollywood Studios. This is my first time going to Galaxy's Edge. As a Star Wars fan, I want to do everything, and right now we have the plan tricked out where I get to do everything, at least barring the the reservation for Rise. But I'm putting down $200 to build a lightsaber. I'm putting down $100 to build a droid. I have reservations for Oga's where I have to buy at least 2 drinks, which is additional $50, let's say. Or if I want to get the commemorative mugs, another $100. And so right there, to experience the entirety of a land is $100 on top of the basic admission. And that's not taking into account if you have multiple kids that want to build droids, multiple kids that want to build lightsabers, things like that. That's a pretty penny. And but the thing with that is, at least there's 2 rides in the park where you can get in. You don't need anything to really experience that. But if you want to experience these kind of hallmark keynote parts of the land, you need to, or you're required to spend these additional dollars, $400 or so, to have that full experience. And with Avengers Campus, the only ride is the Spider-Man attraction. That's it. And there's the Doctor Strange show.
I mean, Mission Breakout is part of like Avengers Campus.
Sure, yeah, fair. But say like the new part of the land, these new additions, you have to pay $60 on top of that. And obviously, you could ride the ride without that. But if you want to have the greatest experience on that ride, or get a high score, things like that, you have to buy that. And it's different than a lightsaber. It's different than a wand because it's actually part of your experience.
Yeah. All this to say, there's no compelling reason to come to Walt Disney World for the 50th anniversary so far. And it feels we're just being collectively turned off as fans.
No, yeah, but the thing is, in what I was trying to say earlier is I don't think they care that we believe that we think that, because they want those families that want to go for that exclusive experience. And I had this really kind of funny, if not kind of dark realization earlier today, is that Disney's becoming the multinational, I would say MLM. And what I mean by that is that they have influencers.
I have a shirt for this, actually.
Do you really? I really think that Disney's becoming a multi-level marketing business, some would say scheme, because they have influencers that they give. There we go. They're really becoming by and large, I think, because they have all these influencers that they have by the purse strings in certain cases, or at least by the free passes and free experiences, telling you to come because if you come, you'll be happy. And a lot of those MLMs are basically happy pills, or at least they project this false reality that if you go or drink this drink or buy this product, that you will be happier. And they have all of us part of this pyramid scheme in a way that we all buy the merchandise with no reimbursement to us. We are free marketing to them. Whenever we post a new statue we buy, we post a new t-shirt we buy, we post our vacation, we are influencing other people to come to the parks. And they realize that they don't need to put much effort into the parks anymore because we are doing the marketing for them.
But not even, out of Walt Disney World, all of the resorts are still expanding, and almost all of the resorts take the anniversary thing seriously. We keep seeing stuff on the Parks blog about Shanghai's 5th anniversary, and they wrote a whole song for it. Hong Kong Disneyland, which I'm wearing the shirt for right now, no one can get into Hong Kong. No one's visiting the park, and they're still throwing this huge 15th anniversary celebration. Universal Studios Japan is doing a scaled-down 20th anniversary, and Tokyo Disney Sea will be doing the same pretty soon. Disneyland will be ramping up for, 60... It's going to probably do something, I'm sure, for the 65th. Something small, but there will be something.
It's already passed.
There's all of these. Well, I mean, Knott's is passed, too. They're doing their 100th. There's another one right there. Knott's is doing their 100th. There's all of these other places that seem to understand the value of bringing people back. And part of it, sure, is the fact that they're locals parks. But you could make the same argument that a locals park and a tourist park really aren't all that different, because you still have a significant number of repeat visitors.
Yeah.
I think too. If you look at like with the pandemic, Disney's assuming a lot of things right now. They're assuming all this. It's very similar in professional baseball. I coach college, but I have a lot of friends that coach pro and stuff. You have your prospects of guys that you're trying to get to the big leagues, but without the rest of your organization having players to play those games, it doesn't work. So in the past, Disney's taken advantage of United Kingdom, Brazil, all these different countries. They're just sort of assuming that they're just going to come back. Like, who's paying the bills to keep the lights on in February? Who's paying the bills in March? Who's paying in years, not necessarily in the 50th? What happens after 18 months? Do you honestly think that when Tron comes out in 2000, it's going to draw people in, or Ratatouille is going to be this giant draw? Like, of course it's not. With Universal closing that gap, it almost feels like once you see that stock price go down, all of a sudden everybody's going to start freaking out, going, "Oh, we never saw this coming!" It just seems to me like they're not really considering all of the collateral damage that's going to go along with this. They're saying, "Well, people will still show up. People will still show up. They don't care." And I think you're right about that, Matt. The problem is, they said the same thing about Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. And then what happened? Well, they didn't do anything that they promised, and all of a sudden, let's build a hotel and do what we promised in the hotel that we were going to do in the land. And the problem is, if they don't execute that, they're losing all this quote-unquote goodwill they had. And there's nothing to say that that people from the UK are going to come for 14 days and spend all that money and ball out. That might not happen. They're making a lot of assumptions that all this revenue, when they're looking at their spreadsheet, like Mike had said, they're looking at their spreadsheet, they're looking at their numbers. Well, if those numbers don't stay in the trend moving forward, you're almost using faulty data to try to predict the future. And I think you're going to find yourself where all of a sudden it's just going to be discounts galore to try to get people to go. And I think there's just people that are going to go, we can't go in February, we can't go in January when kids have school. I think you're going to lose out on some of that. Just a thought. I mean, that foreign market is a market they're just sort of assuming is going to bounce back, and I don't know necessarily that that's the case.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've kind of been beating a dead horse here. Is that ultimately, at the end of the day, those who are going to go to the 50th are going to show up to the 50th, and we are going to see a major redirection to guest experience and how the guests experience the park. Is that we are going to end up paying more, and if you're willing to pay the money to go to the parks, and if my perspective on it is if I get a better experience going to the parks, I will pay the additional money, as long as they are reinvesting that money into making sure that all the animatronics work, all the experiences are to the highest degree, guest experience keeps improving. I will pay the extra money, and I think a lot of us would. And unfortunately, that's going to price a lot of people out, and that's just the sad reality, is that we realize that Disney is a luxury park in a way. It's not a regional park. It's not a Knott's Berry Farms. It's not a Six Flags. It's, if you want to have this magical experience, unfortunately in 2021, 2022, and so on, that's going to cost a little more. And like I said, I'm willing to pay that money if we get that experience. kind of speaking of experience now, our other topic of the night is, what is the experience that we're all going to have now that we're kind of leaving the pandemic, or at least the restrictions are sort of winding down? We now know that since I think the last Pressing Issues show, we have no more masks outside. Masks are still required indoors and in queues and things like that. But breaking this week, Universal has dropped that mask mandate for both outdoors and indoors if you are vaccinated. And I was surprised that Disney didn't just follow suit like they did with the initial drop of the mandate. But we're also now seeing that ride vehicles are being filled up every row. Shows are being now filling up every row. We're seeing the elimination of the markers outside. The extended queues are being eliminated now. They're leaving those in the standard queue. So we are going back to normal, it appears, and even some of the plexiglass is being taken down on rides, which for me I think is really a great idea. So my question to you is, to all the panelists, is when do you think that we're finally going to see the mask mandate for vaccinated individuals indoors at Disney?
Vaccinated.
The first thing when I heard this was, the first thing in my mind was, oh my God, the poor cast members, because the people couldn't even follow the rules when it was a simple rule: wear your mask, and they still had nightmare after nightmare. Now you've got, well, you don't have to wear your mask in a public common place outside, but you got to wear it certain places when you get close to inside or inside. And all I could think of was, oh my God, it's like poor cast members are going to have to try to police this, and it's just going to be, I feel bad for them because people are just idiots. As far as went back to normal, I'm, knock on wood, I'm hoping sooner than later. I mean, the vaccination rates have really have slowed down tremendously. So I don't know what the CDC is going to consider, full vaccination or herd immunity state. But I think this is a huge step, and it's probably going to be a little while, I think, before we see the next one. Maybe a couple months before the next relaxation. But again, it's conjecture on my part, just looking at history here.
I would have said the same thing, but Disney kind of rushed to drop the outdoor mask mandate after Universal said they were going to. And I think that what's been on the mind of management this whole weekend has been, oh God, what do we do? Is it time? Is it worth the risk? The science is pretty clear on what will constitute herd immunity. The problem is the vaccine uptake is slowing down, and it doesn't look like we're going to hit that anytime soon for a number of reasons, due to lack of, I'm trying to find ways to put this nicely, lack of faith in the vaccines, or due to sometimes people don't have time to go get their shots and allocate those days off they might need for the side effects. There's certainly something to be said that Universal and Disney could be jumping the gun because we're not close to that point, but there's also the argument of there may be a reality where we don't ever actually reach the, I think the threshold is something like 75 or 80% fully vaccinated across America to be herd immune. And
we're dealing with
we
that.
Just kind of have to cut our losses,
The college administration, what we had to deal with during our season with the COVID testing and everything. But a lot of colleges are faced with that issue, right? Because it's not just private colleges, whatever. Like, to your point, you kind of said vaccinated, and you kind of made a comment, because legally they can't ask you. That's a federal law
in Florida.
So
yeah,
there's a, but even not even necessarily in Florida. I'm saying from a college level, there's certain medical records we can't have conversations about. So there's a lot of issues going on. It's not just, do this, do that type of thing. There are already some colleges in our area that have already pulled the trigger and said, we're going to require it of all of our staff and all of our students. And they're already, lawsuits have already started. I think Disney is doing what Disney has done recently, which is we're going to let everybody else sort of go through the wall first, and if they are able to get through it, then we're going to say, okay, if Universal gets their pantsuit off, then we'll deal with that. But for now, we'll take a more conservative approach, and then if we have to, then we'll make a change. And that's never really been the case. That's been lately. They've been decided, well, we're just going to do kind of what everybody else does. What made Disney special? They did what other people didn't do. Now they're sort of becoming copycats and just saying, well, okay, well, like you said, they scrambled. There's no question when you're flipping the switch and the cast members don't know and the signs are still up. That's a pretty good indication that you had an 8-hour shift before the parks opened. You couldn't have everybody go, okay, we're going to go around and fix this. Obviously, they didn't know because they had they had the middle of the night to go through while they were cleaning the parks to be able to change signs and signs are still up. So you want to talk about confusion? The poor cast members are the ones that are taking the brunt of all this. They've been furloughed and laid off and taken advantage of. And here's your free subscription to Disney Plus. And then now you get to deal with getting yelled at all day. And that person's not going to have a mask on, and they're just going to scream at you and for a policy that you have to enforce that you had nothing to do with. So I think it's going to be interesting to see sort of what happens.
Well,
I do want to counter one thing you said.
Real quick. We have another super chat again from Gatlinburg Bears. Thank you, Mr. Gatlinburg Bears. He says, Boo Bash cuts off 3 hours of Mickey's Not So Scary. Instead of 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. access, it's 7 p.m. to midnight. We all know the money won't be less. If anything, it'll be more. So, and kind of go back to what we had earlier is that, they want us to pay more money for less access.
I do want to counter something that Coach said, though.
Go ahead.
Doing things first. There's a huge difference between doing new technology first on a ride and being the first person to break health protocols that have been in place at the end of a pandemic. I will give Disney credit for being conservative on that front, honestly. I think that's exactly what they're doing, is just like with reopening the parks, they let Universal do it first and saw if it would work or not. And that's what they're doing right now. They're letting Universal kind of dip their toes in the water and see if they're going to get sued because someone catches COVID at the park. There's definitely a huge difference in doing something first between building something versus health protocol. I just wanted to contrast that really quick.
That's what I meant. Yeah, for sure.
I think there's a middle ground there because Coach is right though. They're definitely taking they're not being a leader in the space. Put it that way. So you can sit back and watch and see what happens and react, or you can say we're going to take the lead, follow the guidance, follow the science, follow the protocols, and be the leader of the show how it's done. And they definitely were not doing that. So from that case, they were definitely sitting back and just using other people as instead of them taking the effort. They were using somebody else's work and then instead of doing the effort themselves. But I think you're going to see Disney maybe change that on the cruise line. I think the cruise line may be where you see that their cruise line maybe might break that because they've always been a leader, especially in health and safety in the cruise line. So hopefully they step forward there and show the world how it should be done. So.
Yeah, I mean, cruise lines are also giant petri dishes, and I'm pretty sure part of the trouble with the state of Florida not allowing companies or businesses or whoever to ask if they have been COVID vaccinated is that all of these cruise lines, their plans for bringing back cruises involve mandatory, fully vaccinated, or they're mandating that all cruisers, I guess, I've never been on a cruise, I don't know what the demonym is, are fully vaccinated. And cruisees, there you go. All the guests. Just say guests. But all of the cruise lines have these plans where they are going to mandate that all of the guests aboard are vaccinated. And it's hard to justify that saying that your cruise is safe when these are basically giant petri dishes and they all sail out of Florida. You can't ask whether they're vaccinated. it's definitely going to be a crapshoot. That's the best way to say it for Florida, for cruise lines. I think Disney, what they could do, and just my 2 cents, they could temporarily sail out of Texas, or they could have all their cruises operating out of LA or New York or anywhere else where there is a cruise port. There are places other than Florida. It might not be, Port Canaveral, but if Disney wants to restart cruises safely, then they have options.
Yeah. Yeah, and I honestly think that Disney is waiting for this holiday to be over. I think we will see the announcement of the inside mask mandate lifted, because for them, from a legal perspective, the Orange County now is saying that the vaccination rate is at X, and that is allowable now. And I think that's why I'm not sure if Universal's in Orange County, but I think their county also lifted that mandate as well, if they're a different county. But Orange County now is saying, like, you can do it, and I think for them right now, they see it as long as it's legal, they're gonna allow it, and just because they want to make sure that those who are in Florida, obviously, those people aren't comfortable wearing a mask or choose not to wear masks for whatever reason. They are more comfortable now at Universal, and Disney wants that demographic still coming to their parks, just to keep those people flowing in. And it's a comfort thing. If people want to wear masks, they can still wear masks. If you don't want to, then they're allowing that opportunity for individuals to make that decision. And the cruise topic is very interesting, because we found out, I think this week, announced that Carnival is not requiring the vaccination to cruise with them. And I'm really going to see how Disney reacts, because if they're going to react in the same way they have interacted with Universal, is that if there's one person in the space that's allowing that freedom, then Disney might be following suit. And that's going to be really interesting to see how they handle that, because one of their competitors in the space is foregoing that requirement. So to say that Disney is now has always been this leader and is going to continue to be a leader in health and safety, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it's really the convenience for guests, the largest demographic, or a wider range of demographics to come into their parks, come into their experiences like the cruise line. I think they're going to potentially allow it, and that's going to be real interesting as well, because they wouldn't be alone in the space.
Yeah, to Mike's point, again, I agree. I think it's just, I'm not saying one way or the other, but it's even their vaccination sites and some of the things that they did seem to be kind of delayed. And again, I'm sure that there's a team of lawyers all sitting there at their desk going, you should wait. I know in higher ed that happened with what the plans were going to be for the spring semester for a lot of different schools. It was like one school just said, we're going to do this. And then, like, miraculously, like that afternoon, there was like 15 schools that released a similar plan. They just didn't want to be that first one. They didn't want to set that precedent. And again, you're dealing with a pandemic that nobody's ever dealt with before. So it's not like a different topic where you can bring in 14 different consultants and experts and say, what do you think? What do you think? No one really kind of knew what was going on. So everyone was sort of guessing and giving their best guess. And, obviously lawyers don't like it when you guess at things, because it's very easy to get sued. So I think that was kind of part of it. And again, publicly traded company where they're worried about their stock prices, one bad headline can definitely hurt them. So I think it falls more under that. But to Mike's point, they definitely were sort of waiting and seeing what was going on, like a lot of people were, truthfully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, I think that from the very beginning, we talked about what's going to be the new normal. And I think right now, at least in Disney World, there's really no new normal. It's just going back to normal, which is going to be, I think, jarring for certain individuals that have been very cautious during this pandemic, but also potentially refreshing for individuals that feel like they can operate and function within these spaces safely. And in my mind, if you have the ability to, if you have these fears and worries about potential health and safety measures, it's not like you can't wear a mask. It's like you can't get vaccinated before going to the park. Disney's allowing for that personal freedom, in my opinion, when it comes to visiting the parks.
I'll take a different angle here for a second. What if, let's just say, July 1st, things are back to normal as far as masks. You don't need masks. We're maskless inside. We're maskless outside. No more social distancing. Does that force Disney's hand then to bring back fireworks, to bring back parades, to bring back entertainment? I'm curious because right now they have a pass on that because we talk about getting back to normal. To me, it's not normal until all that stuff's back. Even though if we have I don't have to wear a mask, but I'm still going to a crippled park. I'm just curious if those type of things happen, if it forces their hand, or if they're happy they don't have, maybe that's their convenient excuse to keep those things off the payroll for now. But that kind of dawned on me.
I think it's much more likely that we'll see entertainment return to Disneyland before we see entertainment return to Disney World. I think Disneyland and California Adventure suffer much more without their entertainment. People in California definitely expect World of Color. They will expect Magic Happens. They will expect some kind of fireworks. They're probably even expecting Fantasmic. But people who come to Disney World, they probably only expect fireworks at the Magic Kingdom, and everything else is ancillary. Nobody really is thinking about Harmonious, Nobody's going to be thinking about the loss of Rivers of Light, despite how bad it was. It was still nighttime entertainment. Nobody really thinks about Fantasmic at Hollywood Studios, as far as I know. I think it's the worst of the three, but whatever. Nobody really thinks about fireworks over Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. The only thing I can really see them pressing the gas on as soon as they possibly can is fireworks at the Magic Kingdom. Everything else, I think, is ancillary and will come back when it's convenient.
Yeah, I think as a Disney World guy, I think for the true nighttime fan who's been to many Disney parks, you're right. But I think for the average guest, Fantasmic is full every show, twice a night. People are at all those, except for Rivers of Light. But, the lagoon around Epcot was packed every night, So I think those shows are missed and would be missed, especially if in a time of normalcy. So I
maybe that's just part of my bias. I just really hate the Fantasmic at Hollywood Studios.
No, right. You are spot on your rating of them, but I just think from an average fan or an average park goer, I think those pieces are still very important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, to continue
Maybe.
your point, doesn't it?
The real question, though, just before I let everyone else go, the real question is, how long will the average guest let Disney get away with not having entertainment this summer as everyone starts traveling again before the complaints keep rolling in and they kind of have their hand forced?
Yeah.
I think it comes down to capacity, doesn't it? If they can open those shows up, then they can increase capacity without, from a numbers perspective, but still keep the percentage up, right? So to me, it comes down to the spreadsheets again. If they open up, the different shows in terms of Fantasmic, or even in Hollywood Studios, smaller park, always busy. All of a sudden, here comes Indiana Jones to save the day, swinging from a rope. Little stuff like that. I think to me, it comes back based on capacity, just the dollars and cents.
If you think about the capacity of those theaters, Fantasmic and Indiana Jones are huge crowd eaters. And those could have been back from day one if they wanted. It was possible to do those with social distancing there, especially because they are outdoor theaters. They could have done those, and it would have easily added to the capacity of the park, which meant that they could have had more people in, making money, making revenue. I really think it will take something forcing their hand to bring back all these offerings. Even Epcot Forever could have been running with social distancing, I think. Put dots on the ground. The lagoon is huge. People would have watched it.
I think the complaints will come maybe if there's comparison. So if someone goes to Universal, their friends go to Universal and say, hey, they met Shaq, they met Homer Simpson, they met the Transformers, and then we come here and there's no characters. How come? I think is that type, maybe that type of comparison to other areas will probably be the first spark of the complaints. I think the second one would be people coming back. People that have come back for their second or third trip, a couple years later, and said, "Hey, we waited for all this, mask stuff to be over with, and we waited, 2 or 3 years, put our trip off by 2 years, and came, and it's just like it was a year and a half ago when this thing started. Nothing's here for it. The pieces that we love are all gone." I think those two things will spark a lot of the complaints.
Yeah, and as much as we bemoan, just really quickly, as much as we bemoan the loss of stuff like the Citizens of Hollywood and other live entertainment at the parks, I do think that your average guest is going to notice those being gone as well, and they're going to complain.
Yeah, and I think everyone made the point earlier that Disneyland would get entertainment back before Disney World, and I think that analysis might be true, because if we are looking at what's going to force their hand is now that we're seeing new meet and greets at the Jurassic World area in Universal in Hollywood, and they're bringing out different versions of the Raptors to experience, and that's not happening at Disneyland at all. I don't think they even have cavalcades at the moment. They have like the characters up in balconies, waving to guests and things like that. But we are seeing that at Disneyland or at Universal Hollywood, which is some of the most restrictive, and one of the states has the most restrictive COVID mandates, is that they're having these meet and greets. They're having these experiences that Disneyland doesn't have. And I think you're correct in saying that Disneyland might get these before Disney World, because Disney World, people are still coming in, and guess Universal Orlando has had these experiences in entertainment for a while now. It seems like they didn't go away other than the park closing. And we have seen really no budging from Disney World to alter experiences, meet and greets, or anything like that. All we see is cavalcades. And the point made earlier, I think a big part of going to Magic Kingdom is that fireworks show and that nostalgia that we all know, and it's kind of an expected thing that we're not getting right now.
That was an interesting thing I noticed with all of the Universal parks as they reopened versus the Disney parks. All of the Disney parks cut their live entertainment, their atmospheric shows, and their stage shows, even here, and we're not even owned by the Walt Disney Company. And then I was reading about Universal Orlando after it opened, and I went to Universal Studios Japan in Osaka, and Universal just made this global decision to preserve everything except parades at their parks, and it paid off. Every time I went to USJ, I felt like it was more alive than when I went to Tokyo Disneyland. And the same thing I'm told is true for people who went to Universal Studios Florida versus the Magic Kingdom and the rest of Walt Disney World, is that the fact that they were willing to spend a little bit extra on these live entertainers that they very clearly need, it really goes to show how differently they chose to operate in the face of the pandemic and where their priorities lie. I think entertainment could have been back, except for the Magic Kingdom fireworks. I mean, they could have even been doing Festival of Fantasy this whole time, and it would have been fine, I think. If they can manage a 5-minute cavalcade, they could have managed Festival of Fantasy. We're doing it right now. We're doing Dreaming Up right now with social distancing. That's our full daytime parade. There's less dancers, but we're doing it. Shanghai's been doing Mickey's Storybook Express, or whatever in God's name it's called, for months now. They're even doing their fireworks show. They were doing Ignite the Dream every night, I think since October, November, or something like that. There's so many places where it feels like Disney just has no excuse for all of these cuts. And as we come back to normal, the real question is, how long, and like we keep saying over and over again, how long are they going to drag their feet?
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess to piggyback of all this is not to keep going on about these little things, but I guess what do we all see as additional experiences, kind of different quality of life experiences that we are going to see post-pandemic. Just beyond entertainment, things like that. Where do you see kind of some, like I said, quality of life, just guest experiences changing as the Disney, especially Disney World, changes in light of kind of this opportunity to have change in the parks?
Well, I'm hoping for less crowded parks. That would be a great experience.
Yeah.
Changer going in the future, which we may see depending on how things, either I'm going to have less crowded parks and pay extremely high amounts for it, or like Coach said earlier, over time the wave is going to run out and they're going to be trying to drag people back to the parks. But that's a great question. I haven't really thought of that too much, but I think character meet and greets are going to be something that we're not going to see for a long time. I have a feeling those are going to be the last thing to come back. I think shows will come back. The theaters are coming back already. Hopefully they'll come back in a more complete capacity, because like Lion King is a very scaled down show. So it doesn't really interest me too much scaled down. Parades, I think, will come back. If fireworks come back, parades come back. But as far as something new, I'm not sure what new, anything new on the horizon that I could say this is something that's coming. It's going to be better that they don't do now. So,
yeah, and
I think you had.
I guess
you had how much time did you have to try to figure this out? That's the other thing that kind of blows my mind. Like, you had an opportunity to solve many of the issues that you've had that you just haven't had a window for, right? I get that you had people canceling reservations. I get that you had all kinds of issues with that. You had an opportunity to completely revamp your tech issues that are known. You can call it downtime. You can call it whatever you want to do it. You can have your PR director draft a pretty thing and yell at Tom and call him, scrupulous, now with scruples and all that other stuff. But the reality is you had a tech problem with your Disney. One hand wasn't talking to the other. This was a perfect opportunity. The parks were shut down. You could have handled things. You could have done maintenance on rides. You could have painted railings. You could have done all that kind of stuff while the park was closed. And you could have done it for cheaper because you're not having this 8-hour window where you can work on stuff. You completely missed the opportunity to go through and work on stuff. What a slap in the face. Universal gets the Velocicoaster done, and Tron is going to be done in 2000. We don't even know. Like, that's embarrassing. At some point, people are going to kind of go, all right, why don't we try this? Because Universal was always sort of like the redheaded stepchild park. You'd go there for a day or two, you'd never stay. Now, people are planning their vacations and going, well, Disney's so expensive, they're still charging the same amount of money. To Mike's point, they're charging the same amount of money for half the experience. So now it's like, okay, well, I'll go to Disney for 3 days, and then I'll go to Universal for 2 or 3. And that's changed the game, I think, in a lot of ways. Universal keeps hitting capacity all the time. Why is that? Because like Spencer said, they never stopped. They made a calculated decision and said, listen, we're going to make a little bit less money now, but we're going to create brand loyalty by having all these people come in, provide a good experience, so that 5 years down the road, when we do open up another gate and expand and have Nintendo World come, this place is going to be booming. And I think, to your point, Mike, that's where you're going to see that tidal wave go. Because I think it was Randy Smith said in the chat, I think it was Randy, he talked about excess DVC points. So they have all these DVC points that have to be used, and all these people are using all these points. And I know our family takes advantage of resale all the time. My wife is brilliant. That's what we do. That's why we can stay at all these great places for way less pricing. That's going to run out too. So what happens when all that excess inventory goes down? And to Mike, to your point, now no one's coming. Now what? Oh, we're going to give you this percentage off of Art of Animation. Yeah, good luck. That's not going to work. So I think you're going to see that tidal wave crash. When it crashes, I think it's going to crash huge. Like, I don't think it's going to be a gradual thing. I think it's just going to run out, and then it's just going to bang. It's going to drop straight off a cliff, because Ratatouille and Tron are not going to save that. Right? It's going to be a temporary bump, and then it's going to go away. And I think, again, are the people in charge even care? Are they even going to be here when it matters? That's my other thing.
People will like Tron.
House,
I think Ratatouille is not special. It's not a good ride. It's nothing to write home about. Tron is fun. I have never been on Tron, disclaimer, but everyone I have ever spoken to loves Tron Light Cycle Power Run in Shanghai. People will like Tron. I think that will be a thing. Hey, there's a new roller coaster at Disney World. People will be interested in that. I don't think anyone's going to be booking trips to Disney World to ride Ratatouille by any means. But especially when you sell people on the idea of, there's 2 new roller coasters at Disney World. You've got Tron and you've got Guardians of the Galaxy. There's plenty of people who will show up just for that. The question is, like you said a little bit more, how do they hold up when Epic Universe opens in 2024 or 2025, whenever it is? And they lose even more ground to Universal because of decisions that they made when they weren't thinking in the long term. Disney's not thinking in the long term. And even Universal, when Comcast did their earnings calls, the past 2 earnings calls, I think the first one was the CEO said that they were on the cusp of profitability. And then the very next one was like, yeah, our theme parks are profitable again, and people are coming back in droves. Clearly the decisions that they made paid off, and Disney still isn't seeing that those decisions paid off for Comcast and for Universal. Yeah. The real test of how strong loyalty will lie with Disney will come when Epic Universe opens and Disney World is entirely unprepared. Especially as Chapek said last year, that they're going to be winding down capital investments at Walt Disney World.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's a big. These executives are so short-sighted at this point, where they just are looking to make a cheap buck, kind of a flashy addition to a park. And I think Tron would make a much bigger impact to Magic Kingdom if it came along with a complete overhaul of the land it's in. It's basically like a polished turd at this point, where there's this exciting thing in the back of the land, but the rest of it it's junk. And if they really wanted it to make a big impact, it should have really impacted the entirety of that land as a whole. And I think the Epic Universe comparison and worry is definitely warranted because, like you said, the Comcast executives, the Universal executives, are playing the long game, where Disney's just playing the short game. And again, I think Tron will be exciting. It'll move some of those crowds to Tomorrowland versus kind of the craziness in Fantasyland with Mine Train and things like that. It'll definitely push those crowds away, so some of those wait times might regulate a little bit. But when Epic Universe opens, it's going to change the game in Orlando, especially because now Universal will be a 3-day park, a 3-day resort versus the two-day park, 1 day if you want to squish everything in. It's really going to become a true 3-day park. And that's going to be the big competition. And Disney has the capital. Disney has the ability to make their parks even better than they are now. Obviously, we all are giving a hard time. We're giving Disney a hard time and all this, but we all really, at the end of the day, we wouldn't spend $1,000 a year to visit these parks if we don't love them. And we want them to be good, and we want them to be good for us in the next 10, 15, 20 years. We want to see their success and our children, the next generation, to experience great parks that we fell in love with. And that's why we keep going. That's why we keep striving to push them to be better. But obviously these executives are very short-sighted. They want to pump and dump their investments at this point.
I think an interesting metric to watch over the next few years will be the market share of net new visitors to Orlando. So, everybody knows Disney's the king of market share, but a huge metric across any enterprise is new users or new business or new sales in that marketplace. Are you still maintaining that market share? And I would love to keep an eye on that number over the next few years, because, if Disney owns it 70-30 today and you get 1 million new visitors next year and it's 50-50 in market share, that's a telling sign and that is something that you watch very closely for your growth numbers across almost any organization. And I can't imagine that they'll maintain their market share over the next 5 years, especially with Universal having their game up so much. Universal upped their game the last 5 years, and they're just keeping that trajectory for the next 5 years. So I can't imagine that market share of net new visitors being the same.
And what's incredible is this is, again, a very uniquely Disney World problem, because none of the other Disney resorts around the world are resting on their laurels. Even Disneyland's doing Disneyland Forward, and they're doing Avengers Campus, and I'm sure there's more in the works for those two parks right now. And we're building a $2 billion expansion on the back of Disney Sea to compete with Super Nintendo World and Wizarding World. And Shanghai Disneyland is building Zootopia, and there's enough space for there's another space for one or two more parks at that resort if they feel like Universal Beijing is starting to chip away at their market share. And I'm sure one's already in the works. I mean, it is a very uniquely Disney World problem where they are just resting on their laurels and thinking, okay, everything's going to be fine now. Everywhere else, even in places where there isn't real competition, like Hong Kong, they aren't sitting still. Even in Paris, too, I can't think of anything except maybe like Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen or wherever that is. It's somewhere in the Netherlands, I think, or Denmark. I don't know. Anyway, somewhere else in Europe is Tivoli Gardens, and that's the only other theme park I can think of other than Disneyland Paris. But Disneyland Paris still isn't sitting still. They're the most visited attraction in Europe, and they're still doing stuff. They're fixing their castle, and they're building a giant expansion to their awful park. It's only in Florida where they're just shrugging. They're like, well, all right, what else do we do? There's nothing else for us to do. We're done here. Just they'll keep coming. Universal doesn't matter. They're totally not going to come up and be a real competitor in the next 5 years, even with a third park. They are really, I think, they might have tunnel vision. They might underestimate the potential of Epic Universe and how much groundwork just in the past year Universal has laid, let alone in the last decade since Wizarding World has opened.
I mean,
it's unbelievable.
Could Disneyland possibly be the wake-up call? Because, I mean, if pass holders are the lifeblood of that park and the pass holder program no longer exists, and the new pass holder program is, they used to pay X dollars a month to get everything. Now it's X times 2, X times 3 for way less than they got before. It is, if that's a huge failure, because that if they are the lifeblood, is that going to be a wake up call saying, wait a second, maybe we aren't the attraction. People aren't just knocking the door to come down here. There was other reasons they were coming here. And in Disneyland's case, it was because you had locals that made it their point of it was their the mall, like when you're a kid. That's where they all went. And if you take that away from them, is there enough of a vacuum there to be filled from outside the state? If it's truly a regional park, I don't see that happening. And that could be a wake-up call, across, especially maybe across the Disneyland world, that, hey, maybe there's some things in the past, that nostalgia, there's reasons why people come that we can't mess with. I just don't see how Disneyland is going to be as successful without having that major base coming like they do now. I could be totally wrong.
I think all of the local parks, I mean, the only two parks that have completely dumped their pass program are Disneyland and Tokyo. And the rest of them clearly see the value in their annual pass holders in at least keeping the parks afloat until such time as they can probably revisit their programs too. But here and in Disneyland and anywhere else where they consider this idea, annual pass holders, while a sizable but still minority, they're not going to survive without annual pass holders. They can't. They need those people to, if nothing else, keep moving merchandise and keep moving the special crazy delicacies that they come up with for random Arendelle Aqua cupcakes or whatever in God's name they're serving in Orlando. I don't know. Disneyland will have annual passes, and if they don't sell, and if the program doesn't look good, then they'll tinker with it. They'll come. People will still come. They just have to. Disney has to find the right balance, because I think there is truth to the idea that the former pass holder program in Disneyland just wasn't working. It was too crowded all the time.
Hey, no, I definitely agree.
Definitely something had to give. And maybe canceling passes entirely wasn't the best idea. Maybe it was the only way. We don't know. I mean, Disney has never said how many pass holders there were at any of their parks. But I can only imagine with how much of a place, I guess, Disneyland was for people living in LA, there had to be just an excessive amount of regularly visiting annual pass holders.
But like Coach said, we'll take Disneyland falling off the edge of a cliff for them to then reset the pass holder program for another time. That's what I could see happening is they roll out the new program and in 12 months the attendance has dropped so much they have to do another reset. Because if you sell a bunch of high dollar passes to people, you can't just come out and just say, okay, we made a mistake. Now the next batch buys them cheaper. You're going to have to do another reset. If you screw up the first time.
Not necessarily. There could be benefits or incentives or discounts. You don't have to completely reset. Or if they decide that they have to do like a colossal cut on the price or something, you can be like, hey, people who bought the premium pass, you get another year free or something like that. There are ways to salvage that.
Still leaves a bad taste.
But the reality. It does. I mean, this whole thing will leave a bad taste in people's mouth. But another reality that we also have to consider is whatever pass holder program Disneyland comes up with, it will come to Florida within 12 months of whenever it comes to California.
Yeah, and I think I was kind of hinting at this earlier in the show, is that I think in Disney's mind, if they can triple the cost of an annual pass, and they only sell a third of the passes they sold prior, they're happy as can be. They're no worse off financially. If pass holders are willing to pay, like I said, a third of those pass holders are willing to pay 3 times the price for a less crowded park, more exclusive experiences, and Disney's bottom line hasn't changed. And to Disney, their hands are clean to their shareholders. Guest experiences is better, and that's just how they're going to start operating. And I think the same is going to be happening here in Disney World, where if they can sell a fourth of the pass, half of the annual passes they have now, or even half the hotel stays, but the bottom line is the same, then, like I said, they're happy as could be, and their shareholders aren't affected, their stock price isn't affected, potentially guest experiences improved because they can really focus on that 1/3 of the guest population or half the guest population. To them, they're happy as can be, and I think we can complain about the price of passes and this potential price increase, things like that. But if I can go to the parks with half the wait times, a third of the wait times, and yes, I paid more, but I know that I'm paying more, then I think that at the end of the day, some people might be happy with this change. And obviously it affects the lower income individuals, but that's just how it might end up shaking out. So yes, there's this fear of 3 times the price for an annual pass, but I thought, like I said, as long as Disney can sell a third of the passes, then that's just the reality of it.
I'm willing to pay more if the guest experience is better, honestly. Mm-hmm. Our tickets, there is noise outside my window, I'm so sorry. Our tickets are stupid cheap. I think it converts to like $78 for one day at Disneyland or DisneySea. And before COVID, our passes were something like $800 to $850. And it was just the one tier, and you would just get in on any day except certain national holidays. And the flip side of that is, well, part of the reason everything's so cheap here is because incomes in Japan are generally lower. But also, the flip side of that is our parks are notoriously overcrowded. Tokyo Disneyland is the 2nd or 3rd most visited theme park in the world, although I don't believe those numbers. I think that we are higher than the Magic Kingdom, and they report Disney higher, but whatever. Our crowd numbers and our wait times were insane before the pandemic. And I remember when the ticket price was announced last year before COVID, they said they were going to raise it to about $80 a day. When they announced the ticket price, everyone was like, oh, Disney's getting too expensive and it's not worth the money anymore, blah, 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 blah. I still think that they could go higher, and I would be very glad to see them go higher. I mean, our annual passes, again, were $800, $850. I would still, if I could get shorter lines and I wouldn't have to be elbow to elbow even on a weekday in January with people, I would gladly pay $1,600, $1,700 for an annual pass for our two parks. It's the amount of money that we are willing to pay is just directly correlated to what we're getting out of it. And granted, we have more and more consistent entertainment and our attractions are kept in better condition, which probably factors into my cost benefit for paying $1,600 for a pass for two parks. But that the same formula could apply worldwide. And I'm pretty sure that a good amount of fans in local parks or even at Walt Disney World be willing to pay higher prices if it meant that there's less people in line. You don't have to wait 3 hours to ride Slinky Dog Dash or 3 hours to ride Millennium Falcon, or you don't have to get a boarding group for Rise of the Resistance. It would be a shame because it would cut out a lot of the low and even middle class families who want to visit Walt Disney World and Disneyland. Mm-hmm. But like you said earlier, the parks are a luxury experience. There's a point when you have to expect to pay those luxury prices.
Yeah. Yeah, and from someone that's been there on holiday weekends and things like that, it's not fun.
Oh God, no!
I think I told the story before. I was there on New Year's Eve, and I was at Epcot, and Epcot on New Year's Eve is pretty popular because of the drinking. But we left like by lunch and went back to our hotel and came back in the evening to watch the fireworks, things like that, because we couldn't move. Even down the large pathways that are in Disney World, it was difficult to even get to the next pavilion. We just left. And I think that Disney recognizes that they lost out on my purchasing power because I didn't go to a restaurant for lunch. I went back to my room and just kind of relaxed, took a nap because it was exhausting even to get to the parks because transportation was so clogged up that day. So I think that's part of their cost-benefit analysis as well, is that they recognize that on certain days that the guest experience is fairly low. And we talk about cultivating for the future. And I think if you're stuck with that memory of, oh, I went to Disney World and I couldn't do anything, it took me 2 hours to get on a ride, that is also a factor in future guest retention. So I think that's something that we need to think about as well.
Yeah, because you'll tell your friends and your family, like, oh, we couldn't do anything and there was too many people. This is actually somewhere where I think Park Pass could be a benefit, is if they actually kept a lower capacity just in general, even on holidays and weekends. You know, you charge more for a ticket based on date, but even if they just keep capacity low, number one, exclusivity for a good product sells. We've seen that with everything. You know, people want PS5s, people want Nintendo Switches, people want to go to Disney World, they want to go to Disneyland, and part of the reason why is probably because no one else can. That would be another big selling point. Hey, I got to go to Disney World and no one else did. Yay me. And you still get a good experience out of it because you don't have to wait 3 hours in line for everything. I don't see Disney doing that by any means, but it would definitely work.
Yeah. Yeah. And
anyway, I've been talking a lot. I'm going to let everyone else go.
No, and I think you're spot on with that. And I saw someone mention in the chat the old school way of going on rides was they charge per ride, and I don't think we'll go back to that by any means. But I think the reality of paid fast passes is kind of along that same lines, is that they want to push people to pay per ride in a way. Obviously, the standby lines are still available, but I think that charging for those fast passes, charging for a ride experience, is continually going to push forward this idea that we've been bouncing around all night, is that Disney's trying to price out certain guests, and it's not going to be as cheap and easy. Obviously, Disney World is not cheap in general, but it's going to become harder and harder to get on rides if you aren't willing to pay the extra, however they want to charge for a fast pass. So I think that's continuing to be part of the pricing as well.
The problem is they've raised prices, right? And then the corporate greed comes out, and they just continue to raise prices, right? They cut all the experiences, all the entertainment, everything else, and then they kept charging the same amount, right? Yeah. And that's part of the problem, is that, oh, they'll pay this. All right, will they pay this? Will they pay this? Will they pay this? And they just keep kicking the can down the road. And eventually there is going to be a point where people are just going to go, I don't know, right? Part of the deal is, your children and everything, they watch Mickey Mouse and everything else, and they say to their parents, we want to go, we want to go, we want to go, we want to go, we want to go. But eventually there comes to a point where you just can't afford it, right? If you got a family of 4 and now you're paying for the 4 annual passes, now you're paying for, for Fast Pass and everything else. And there is a side to this, right? I had a cousin that worked at Universal for a very long time, and he talked about, to Spencer's point, they had Harry Potter's World planned, but they had a secondary, which was the renovation, planned based on whether or not that was successful. So even though it may have looked like they just had one land done, they had that extension already planned out. It was already drawn up. The plans were already there. He showed them to me, which was amazing. He said, wait till you see what's going to happen in the next 10 years. If this park blows up, it's going to be gigantic. Just watch. And he was right, because he knew, right? The issue that I have is that there is no end game here. At some point, they're going to charge too much money, and the average family's not going to be able to go. And when that happens, and that's already happening now, when that happens, then what? To Mike's point, how do you backtrack at that point? You give discounts, you give discounts, you give discounts, you give discounts. There has to be a breaking point. You can't just keep stuffing people in and having everybody shoulder to shoulder. To your point, I've been there when it's been busy too, and it doesn't become fun after a while. After a while, you're like, all right, well, then maybe we'll just go to Universal for a couple of days. And I think they need to find that balance. And I don't know if the current administration really cares, because I don't know if they know they're going to even be there. It's kind of like, if I'm getting ready to retire, why would I ever want to change anything? Why wouldn't I just want to keep status quo, sail into retirement, cash all my stock options in, and enjoy my new fancy house that I just built? And I'm talking about you, Chapek, right? You go through the whole thing. He already knows what he's got. He's got an exit strategy in 2 or 3 years. He's not trying to make waves. And we're all looking at Josh tomorrow going, hey, Josh, are you listening? Are you around? You going to say something? Because he's got an investment into it. Or at least we think he does. So at what point, what's the breaking point? And to Spencer's point, I think it is when they open that new world in Universal in Florida, Superintendent World comes out, it might be too late for them to catch up. That's just my opinion.
Well, and to all of you here, I think we are really great on the show of like passing the buck off to Disney, like, hey, figure it out. And obviously we're like, well, this experience is bad, and overcrowding is a reality. We don't like it, and we also from on the other side of our mouth, we're saying we don't want to see price increases. So I guess the question to all of you, not to put you on the spot, is that what would you suggest that the Disney parks do to alleviate this overcrowding issue without necessarily going super hard on the price increase?
I don't think there is another way.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in the utopian pixie dust world, it would be maybe you institute a park pass system like Spencer said, and limit capacity on certain days. You could flux capacity, maybe weekdays is one level, weekends or another, holidays or another, but never let it get bigger than the park can handle. So, when it's seasonal, things are closed. So when things are closed or not running, the capacity numbers are down a little bit. But if it's make every dollar you can, that's never going to happen. And if you look at, I mean, look, I looked at Disney stock price today because I was just curious. It was $91 when the pandemic hit. It's $191 today. So, and you think about that, they had DCL's been closed, Disneyland's been closed, parks closed all over the world, and their stock has more than doubled. So from a fan point of view, it's going to be really hard to get anybody in the corporate level to pay attention when your stock is doubling during a pandemic. It's really going to be hard to get that. But we can dream, we can hope, but I just think the course they've set now to optimize money through cost savings and cost offering less and boosted price increases, just like the DVC for Grand Floridian, that's great. That's gonna make the Grand Floridian more expensive because there's less room. So you can see that trend. I mean, so I just think that's the way things are going. Unfortunately, not the the way I would hope it would go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it just needs to be, to Mike's point, it's got to be a kick. It's got to be something that's dramatic and drastic. And it's probably going to be somebody new coming in. New leadership a lot of times want to put their own stamp on things. Hopefully from either outside the company or somebody completely new that walks in and says, hey, it could be something along the lines of the streaming service as well. That kind of bailed them out, to Mike's point. Disney Plus, everybody was home watching that. You wonder if something like that comes along and crashes, and all of a sudden they don't have that cash cow in Disney Plus that they're hoping. I mean, even how they're managing Disney Plus, if you look at, they have this old catalog of all these movies that they own and have all the rights for, and none of them are on Disney Plus. And it has nothing to do with them trying to be socially conscious or anything like that. That argument aside, it has nothing to do with that. Some of these movies have no issues with that whatsoever, and they're just sitting on a shelf collecting dust, and you're going, how is it possible, and I mentioned this on Cosmic Greed on Monday, how is it possible that Disney's House of Villains, which is a great movie that has really no issues that I'm aware of in it, not on Disney Plus? Like, how's that possible? Like, you own the content. You're starved for content. You have it as content. Why is it not on? Why are there not extras for these movies that you have, DVD extras that you already have anyway? Some of the decisions they're making, it just kind of blows the mind. It's like you're looking for content, yet you're willing to spend all this money on something that may or may not work, but yet you have existing content that you can just put on the Disney service. So I don't think they're infallible in terms of how Disney Plus works. I'm interested. My thought process would be is if Disney Plus starts to tank or go south, or a different streaming service comes out and takes over, I think you may see a little bit more investment back in the park. It seems like they're getting away from that as a result because they feel like those extra revenue streams are going to save them. But if those go away, now you have a serious problem. Now you have to go back to what was making you money in the first place, which was the parks. So short of that, I don't think we see a new gate or anything else.
They did say that Disney Plus is the new focus of the company. So what else do we expect? That being said, the day that they put House of Mouse on Disney Plus is the day that I get my own Disney Plus account. And that is all I will say about that.
Yeah, and I honestly don't think that Disney Plus is going anywhere for anytime soon, or even the animation in the studios.
Oh, not at all.
I just heard this afternoon that Raya beat out Wonder Woman and a lot of other movies that came out during that time period. That Disney's still producing great movies that are bringing people in and bringing money in, and so I think that obviously that stock price was a big majority of that was from Disney Plus, and I think what I talked about earlier is that Disney has the money coming in to reinvest in the parks they wanted to, which was kind of the crux of that discussion earlier with the Comcast versus Disney discussion in terms of how they handled the parks. But so I think that what we've kind of come down to this, and we've kind of got off the conversation a little bit, is that for guest experience, at least in terms of the day-to-day, the getting on rides, dealing with cast members, things like that, the reality of it is to get that experience improved or alleviated is to raise prices, because I haven't heard anything from any of you all yet that would tell me otherwise. And I think from in the Disney boardrooms, that's just what the reality is, that they're bouncing around, and it's just kind of how supply and demand work, is that the demand is very high and the supply is low, barring them building a fourth gate. That's the only way for them to alleviate some of those issues. Spencer, you're muted.
Sorry.
You're good.
I said, speaking of other gates, though, Disneyland's reopening to out-of-state guests.
That is true.
And that's good news.
Yeah. And so I think kind of wrapping up the show at this point, we can talk about that, but if you all have some happy issues or kind of our roundtable discussion at the end of the show of what's some news that I know we've been kind of down and out, kind of the more doom and gloom, the apocalypse is coming for Disney perspective on the show tonight. But where do you guys see some good news that you guys have seen this week?
So my good news is kind of something we talked about already. Was as this is the return to normalcy. Disney was very slow doing anything. They were 3 or 4 steps behind the CDC even in there with a lot of things they're doing with their masks. Because it was masks, and now you can't walk with your mask off. You have to sit down and actually be seated to eat. So I was always worried about how long it's going to drag out. But as quickly as they moved on the last mask mandate to remove the masks, that gave me hope that we're going to be back to a more normal experience in the park sooner than later. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of waiting for that. I'm once I can go there and not have to worry about when to wear my mask, if it's 110 degrees outside and I got to have a mask on, when I can get there and just enjoy what's there, it may not be everything. I'm really looking forward to that. So that was kind of my positive piece. Was it looks like they're willing to move there quicker and sooner than they were in the beginning of this.
I'm really excited for the new studio. I don't know if that's directly related to Disney, but I will be down there in late summer and have the opportunity to actually see 2 shows in person, which I'm very excited about. I'm trying to beg my way on one of the panels, so we'll see how that happens and potentially do a live stream. So very excited about that. But no, we were going out with a big family trip for the 50th wedding anniversary of my mother-in-law and father-in-law. So we have some cool stuff planned. There is a new experience that was new to me anyway that we booked. That's you can kind of book your own photographer in different areas of the park. It's like super reasonable. So we're actually going to do that. So my mother-in-law is going to get her photos in front of the castle, and that's going to be really awesome. And I'm sure there'll be lots of crying and smiling and everything else. So it's going to be pretty cool for us. And we're just excited because we have people in our party that have never or only been to Disney for one day. So my kids are going to be able to hang out with their cousins and do some cool stuff and ride some rides they've never ridden before. And my daughter is now big enough to ride on Splash Mountain, which is my wife's favorite ride. So that's going to be pretty cool. And so we just kind of make those memories and have a good time and rock the Carousel Products merch and have a good time. So I'm excited about it for sure. As much as we complain and call it depressing issues, it's still an awesome place to go. So I can't wait, to be honest with you. So
I have a couple of things just really quickly. Number one, it turns out that I have been completely wrong in criticizing criticizing the vaccine rollout here in Japan. As it turns out, our daily average has been almost 500,000 shots a day. I just haven't noticed because it's been all old people for the past little while. So many of you may know that our vaccine rollout here has not been very fast because of Japanese bureaucratic incompetence, among other things. But they announced yesterday that they are going to be compressing the rollout timeline, and now people with pre-existing conditions and just people in general under 65 will be eligible for their shots at the same time. And that's really exciting because it means I might get my shots sooner. I'm still unvaccinated. 95% of this country is still unvaccinated. So we're kind of waiting to catch up with all of you Americans who are ending the pandemic. It's still a very real reality here in Japan. The other good news is I'm going to Tokyo Disneyland on Tuesday, which is tomorrow for me, and I'm very excited about that. And I just love going to the parks because I don't have an annual pass anymore, so it's very special for me.
Yeah, for me, I would say there's a few things that I've been really excited to see this week. I'm really excited to see that we're finally getting some more progress on Tron. I know I gave Tron a hard time earlier in the show, but I think it's going to be, at least we're getting something new in the parks, or at least Magic Kingdom in the near future. So I'm really excited to see how that is, and I'm just excited to see it finally finished. So to see that they're finally doing internal work on Tron is going to be is exciting to me, and I think that getting something new is good. And from reviews, it's a fun ride, barring them somewhat. It's a very themed but not themed attraction. So like I said, I'm excited to at least see it finished, and I'm excited to ride it whenever I'm there post completion. But I'm also really happy to see that the college program is accepting applications again. I think, and in general, cast members are coming back in droves now, it appears, and they're putting up new job postings, things like that. So I'm excited to see that Disney's finally giving their cast members work again, giving them some respect, and allowing them to do the job that they were hired to do, and not just keeping them on furlough and laid off. So I'm excited to finally bring those back, giving also those young kids the opportunity to work at Disney. It's a great resume booster for most of those students. Even if the conditions might be not ideal, it's a whole other debate. But at least those who choose to be part of the program have the opportunity to be part of the program. So I'm really excited for them there. And then as a Star Wars fan, I'm excited to see that Galaxy's Edge is getting some new merchandise as well, with more Mandalorian representation and things like that, to just add another thing for me to buy when I'm there in a month or two. So yeah, I think barring our kind of doom and gloom discussion tonight, there are some really great things in the future, and we really hope that the Disney parks listen to us, and not only if they are going to raise prices, let's at least have a better guest experience too. So yeah, any last words from you guys for tonight?
Be sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. We always appreciate it. And if you enjoy all the stuff we do here at WDWNT, you can of course join our Patreon, patreon.com/WDWNT. It's awesome.
And Carousel products as well.
Did you send any more stuff to Tom? Because those unboxings have been great.
We are putting a temporary hold on sending new stuff. I still have more stuff over there. There will always be new stuff over there. But there's 2 more videos in the works right now, so you can stay tuned to WDWNT.TV, address for our entertainment channel, for all of our Tokyo unboxings, where you can watch him take out cool stuff, none of which I seem to have on my desk that I have actually sent to him.
It does a highlight.
I do enjoy. I will call for more Spencer's notes, because I love when he says something and then because Tom, I love Tom, but he loves correcting people, and I love when he says something and then you go Spencer's note.
Yes, those definitely.
I enjoy that. I enjoy that.
There are moments, okay, and I try to be courteous about it, but there are of course moments where he's completely wrong about something, and I'm like, that's not right. And so when we make those videos, Tyler will send them to me so I can identify all the merchandise for him. And then I'll just listen to all the things that Tom rambles about. And a lot of the ones I've written haven't actually made it in. Usually when I make a joke, there's been a couple times when he'll be like, "Oh, I'm a hoarder." I'm like, "Spencer's note, Tom is indeed a hoarder," or something like that. But I do have a lot of fun making those. And it's fun a little bit to also, because I know Tom is this Disney parks expert, so sometimes in a very schadenfreude way, it's kind of fun to be right. Anyhow,
I would love to see an edit on those videos of Spencer commentating over top, like a director's cut or a director's commentary, like that. That would be.
That should be a WIGS exclusive. WIGS
exclusive. I've got a couple things in the pipeline that I'm trying to pitch for WIGS exclusive content. So maybe I'll talk to Axel and Jill and see what we can do.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Well, thank you all again for joining us this evening. Thank you again to my panelists. It's been an honor hosting the show in lieu of Jason being away for the weekend. But also, sending you guys all off. Make sure you guys have a great and lovely Memorial Day weekend. Make sure you take a moment to thank a veteran, thank those active duty members, and especially reach out to all those family members who might have active military people in their family, men and women, or even those especially who have lost family members during now or in the past. So we thank all of our servicemen and women, especially this weekend, on this giving us the ability to have a 3-day weekend. So I want to make sure we thank them, especially this weekend. So, but yes, thank you all for joining us for Pressing Issues, and we'll see you all next week. Have a good night.
Take care, everybody.
Good night, or good day, I guess. The cue to end the show is now.
Yes. Did our tech guys get back on the show for us?
They're like, this is the post show.
Hello, everybody. This is the post show for Pressing Issues that you keep asking for. Oh my gosh, Coach, when are you going to Florida? I gotta know.
Coach,
oh, did he log off? I think he logged off.
I just told Jason that we're done, so hopefully he'll.
Oh yeah, the chat says he signed off. Oh, there he is. He's back.
I logged back in late July.
Late July. Okay, interesting. Oh, so you will be around.
And I came up with my own rendition of Spike the Bee called Rally Bee.
Oh yeah, sing us out of the show.
Yeah, I can probably play it for you, so we have the actual. I could do that.
Oh, you're gonna get us copyrighted, aren't you?
No, because I did it super low, so you can't get copyrighted on it.
I think we're still live, guys. Just so you know.
We are still live. We're just trying to fill the silence. We gotta fill the silence until Jason can end the show.
Yeah. Embrace the space, right?
Yeah. What time is it? Oh, it's almost 11.
Yeah.
Can you hear this?
We're going to kick off here in a couple seconds. Maybe.
Can you hear this?
Yep.
Just barely, but it's good enough. Just enough to keep us to the outro.
Oh, this is actually just the music. Hold on. Wrong one. Whoops. Good point, though. We are supposed to be trying to have a... How long they've been asking for that?
It's okay. We've gone this far. We might as well not have a post show, or might as well not play it for them. Or do, apparently.
When I find myself coaching baseball...
Can you hear that?
Looking for some runs to score. Gotta get a spork with Rally Bee.
What?
You're being cut now.
Minutes without scoring a run. Standing right in front of me.
Good night, everybody.